Welcome back to Moments That Matter. Our guest this week is Dr. David Conley, lecturer in performing arts at Clemson University. He earned his doctorate at Covenant Seminary, where he completed a dissertation on the theology of Tolkien, Lewis, and others. He was also a double major in music and English literature, the first of which has been his vocation and the second his avocation. In his vocation, he is choral director of and lead arranger for the pop ensembles Take Note and Tiger Roar at Clemson, as well as instructor of music theory, pop choral arranging, and music appreciation. In his avocation, he is the founder of Inklings Abroad, and for the past 20 years, he has led groups across the pond to take tours of places like Oxford, Cornwall, Scotland, Ireland, and other Inklings-connected sites across Europe, digging deep into the history of C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and all things Inklings. I recently met David as a result of the book idea I described a few weeks ago on Moments That Matter, the idea that woke me up at 3 a.m. with a crazy notion of investigating the potential connection between the creative pairs Lewis and Tolkien and Lennon and McCartney, who shared the commonality that they had all lost their mothers in adolescence, but who subsequently, because of their shared talent and creativity, supported each other through loss and achieved great success together in their respective fields. David has agreed to team up with me to see this project to fruition. Welcome to Moments That Matter, David.
Thanks, Paul. It's truly an honor and privilege to be here, and it's been a super opportunity to meet with other folks like you who have this passion for the Inklings and other creative folks as well.
So there's a lot that we could talk about today, but at least initially, let's confine ourselves to the Inklings and your group, Inklings Abroad. Can you tell us about the group and what all is involved in the tours you take people on?
Of course, be happy to share a little bit about this. Been having the chance to do this for over 20 years. And just as a bit of background, it started off as a high school literature course that I was teaching. The folks who were leading this cooperative of homeschool educators wanted someone to teach on modern English literature. And they said I could do one semester on C.S. Lewis and one semester on J.R.R. Tolkien. And I was like, okay, yeah, twist my arm a little bit on that. The clincher was, they said at the end of the year's course, they wanted to pay my way if I would plan the trip, they wanted to pay my way to England and visit all of the sites we talked about in Tolkien and Lewis's books. And so once again, I had to say, well, my arm's already twisted. Sign me up for this. And so it was a great opportunity to take some students over. And that was kind of the rest is history. We've gone almost every year since then. COVID has interrupted those journeys a little bit, but we're hoping to get back over there this May. In terms of what we try to do that makes our group a little different, we actually try to call ourselves travelers rather than tourists. And so we want to have a little different feel. There are a lot of other groups that go to Inklings related sites and stuff like that. And while we will visit some of the more popular ones and also some of the more normal tourist spots in England and other places around Europe, we want to get off the beaten path. We want to linger in places and spaces that were very critical and significant to the lives and writings of the Inklings. We want to have a chance to interact with the local people there and see some of the wonderful scenery that inspired a lot of the writings of these folks. Essentially, we talk about people having the motivation to go on these trips, thinking about the Lord of the Rings, the Chronicles of Narnia. These movies and books have remained insanely popular year after year. And those are just kind of scratching the surface of some of the works of creativity of two of the most famous authors of the 20th century, J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And we want to try to dig deeply in what made these authors have those moments that matter, if you will. These two works by Tolkien and Lewis are just scratching the surface when it comes to discovering how these two Oxford professors impacted our world. Again and again, a lot of people have selected J.R.R. Tolkien as the author of the 20th century, as in citing his work as a beacon of hope and truth that emerged following some of history's darkest years. A prolific writer of many books, C.S. Lewis also has written bestsellers across many genres, including fantasy, sci-fi, and Christian theology. We try to explore the creative legacy of these two men and their friends in the Inklings as it connects to our own lives as well. The main way we do this is by journeying to the places that seem to be inspirational for them. We go to a lot of the landscapes that seem to inspire the imagination and creativity of J.R.R. Tolkien, for example, like heading to the cliffs of Cornwall, where he journeyed and as a child, and we reenact some of the hikes and walks along those majestic cliffs on the southwest coastal path of England, and explore some of the rocky landscapes and all of the majestic views of the powerful sea, which informed and so fueled Tolkien's own mythology and stuff along those lines. We try to visit places in Oxford as well, where Tolkien and Lewis lived and worked for decades, building up their friendship as collaborative, creative people, sharing fellowship and beverages at the many pubs they hung out together, and also in their halls of academia and other places there in Oxford.
I mean, you understand better what the trips abroad look like. But your group also meets on a regular basis here in the Clemson area.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that's actually one of our foundational guiding principles is that we wanted these trips to become more than just once a year journeys. We have become friends with these people who travel with us, and many of them come again, and again. We have several 5 and 6 time travelers on our journeys over the years. We have started, we basically call them little Inklings chapters, if you will. We've got 4 groups in the upstate of South Carolina and in Georgia as well that are mostly comprised of people who have gone on our trips or would like to go on our trips, or are just basically have the same kind of, they're excited about what we do. And so we basically meet a couple of times a month, and we gather over food and beverages, of course, as in tribute to the original Inklings. And we sometimes will read works by one of the great Inklings writers like C.S. Lewis or J.R.R. Tolkien. Right now, we're going through Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis, and we just got finished doing The Great Divorce, and that was super fun to be able to do both of those works, reading them out loud to each other, and then having discussion on its impact in our lives as brothers and sisters, as friends, companions along that journey as we interact with the works. We also have the chance for people to bring their own creative works. And so many of us do some writing or something creative on the side, where, for example, like with me as well, I do music as well as writing. And so I have 2 areas that sometimes we bring some little bits to. We're always, we want to provide, this is kind of one of our unique ways of pulling this off, is we want to have a safe place for people to share their creative gifts in a way that preserves our relationship primarily. We can still critique one another and try to really sharpen one another, like Tolkien and Lewis did, like Paul McCartney and John Lennon did in their partnerships. But we don't ever want to destroy or damage those friendships that we have built over the years. And those kind of are the priority for us as Inklings. And so when we meet together, the main goal is for us together as friends, as brothers and sisters, as companions on the journey. And then we sharpen one another with helping each other be more creative, whatever our vocation or job.
Okay, that's great. David, I'm particularly interested in the core talks you do, applying Tolkien's themes of recovery, escape, and consolation to the Christian life. Can you explain a bit of what you talk about?
We talk about recovery, escape, and consolation. These are originally, these concepts were written about in Tolkien's work on fairy stories And he initially gives them a mostly literary thrust. He has hints of other stuff in there, but what my kind of unique contribution to his argument was to take it beyond just stories or mythology, as he originally applied it towards. And I try to apply it to any form of creativity. And so we want to use some of those same terms, but they're a little more, they're a little richer and broader, and hopefully there's applicability for anyone, not just anyone who thinks they're creative, but anyone who just lives and walks this side of heaven with their vocations and families and just day-to-day life. So we want to give people tools to apply recovery, escape, and consolation at every level, if you will. What recovery has to do is getting clear sight of realizing the awareness that, hey, you're in a prison cell, but that doesn't mean you have to be trapped there, either emotionally or even physically. And this leads you to kind of what Tolkien was talking about, is the whole next level of escape. And what we basically get into is that recovery is a return of clear sight, finding health once again, a return and renewal of that health, and regaining a clear view of who I am in the world, and what my status is before God. Hopefully that comes into play as well as it would have with Tolkien. Essentially, it gives us new perspective and enables you to see things as they are. And it should also refresh our entire being, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. One of the ways we try to capture this, for example, on our trips, is as we hike up we go up one of these castles on a mountain in the Bay of Penzance Bay there in Cornwall, England. There's a place where Tolkien visited as a young man. And as you go up the mountain, it's a steep ascent on this island in the bay. And they've built a manor and a castle and a church as well, a chapel up there at the top. And as you hike up, you're sometimes being battered by 30-mile-an-hour winds. The rain is coming down, it's cold, and you're just barely putting one foot ahead of the other. And then when you go into the castle for the first time, all the windows are small and they're grimy and they haven't been restored or cleaned or whatever. And then finally, after trudging sometimes for 20 or 30 minutes just to get up to this point, you walk around and go outside on the open terrace and the battlements of the castle, and you can see a beautiful view of the sea there and the Cornish landscapes and the mountains and the hills around it. And hopefully the sun has come out by this point as well, and you just have this incredible moment of recovery where you see the beauty around you, stuff you may have seen many times, but it strikes you a different way, a new way. And that's kind of what I think Tolkien was trying to get at, is we need to have these moments of recovery where we can regain clear perspective and realize that although our path is hard, the view at the end is quite well worth it. And so that is kind of a bit of recovery on that side of it. That leads to the next level, which is the whole idea of escape. And Tolkien, of course, started out using the illustration with a prisoner of war, somebody who is trapped in that cell, that prison cell. He actually makes the case that escape, when it's done in a healthy way, is actually a good thing, and we should try to do it. And now this is one of the things we try to differentiate between as escape, genuine escape, versus its idle or its broken side, which is escapism. And there are two ways of looking at this. But escape, as Tolkien says, is evidently very practical and may even be heroic. In real life, it's difficult to blame it unless it fails. Why should a man be scorned if, finding himself in prison, he tries to get out and go home? And that is Tolkien's quote from On Fairy Stories right there. But essentially what beauty and these moments of recovery give us is a genuine escape where we can see the self-made evils and brokenness of our world, and we can realize that we are trapped in a prison, but we don't have to stay there. We can have the courage because we've seen clearly the beauty around us, the beauty in the world, the beauty ultimately of what Tolkien believed, of course, the beauty of the world beyond the primary world, actually. But we can see that beauty so clearly that we have the courage to escape from our prison, that sometimes our broken world, that we find ourselves in this broken world. And so once again, escape becomes very practical. Now, we want to definitely quickly balance this with escapism. This is not what we're trying to say here at all. Escapism is something like where the prisoner finds a way to numb his senses to his surroundings, and eventually just sort of become addicted to something or so numb to something that you just become you're comfortable to stay in your filth, and you don't even care to even see, or you don't even care to try to escape. It's the difference that Tolkien says about a prisoner of war is somebody who breaks free of that prison and then returns to the battle. That's true escape. The deserter or the escapist is somebody who, if they get out of that cell, they don't go back to the battle. They continue to check out of real life. Or what we would say, another illustration with this would be something like a video game where I would come home. And if I play this video game, sometimes I'll come home and play. I love soccer. It's one of my favorite sports, and so I have this great FIFA video game. Sometimes I come home and play, and so when I use it as escape, I come home, pick up the game. I've had a bad day, and I play one round, just about 30 minutes. And I'm able to no matter whether I win or lose, I'm able to kind of enjoy it and have a little bit more perspective and energy to come out of the computer and go say hey to my kids and family and to my wife, and we're able to get back to normal life. That's kind of escape. And the escapist example of that would be if I come home and I play a game of this video game, and then I keep playing and play again and again and again. I ignore all calls to come out for anything. I basically just get number and number to the world around me. And eventually, I'm just kind of drugged myself into this oblivion. And that's escapism, which is not what we would try to endorse with this at all. But good art, beauty in the world, and this is one of the things, again, we try to encourage as we travel. When we see these beautiful places, when we see beautiful art, beautiful works of creativity by humans, any human really, we should have that feeling of genuine escape. And it should give us courage to continue walking the difficult road, to continue fighting the battle, to go back into service, if you will, with renewed energy. And the final step of all of this is consolation. And consolation in Tolkien's original picture, he calls it the happy ending. The consolation of the fairy stories is the joy of the happy ending, or more correctly, of the good catastrophe. And as Tolkien always tended to do, he came up with his own cool term for this. He called this new term, this great joyous turn, a eucatastrophe. So a good catastrophe, if you will, or a disaster of amazing good, if you can use that image together. But essentially, it's this sudden and miraculous turn. And essentially what it is, it's a glimpse of the gospel. It's a glimpse of grace. It's a glimpse of joy that comes in from beyond the walls of the world. And this is one of the cool things that we try to bring in. It doesn't just happen if the author intended you to have a glimpse of joy. My premise is that in any human work of creativity that has some of these qualities in it, you can find that joyous turn. You can find that moment where grace breaks in to some degree, and we can find encouragement and again energy and joy to persevere on the road that we need to keep walking. And this is what Tolkien, I think, would try to have us see as well, because once again, the happy ending isn't going to happen in any of these stories. It isn't going to really happen in this life. The true consolation lies beyond. And so we're actually tapping into the joy and the beauty of heaven and trying to live in that immediate reality day to day, even amidst the struggles, even amidst the battles. It doesn't minimize those, but we now have true consolation to persevere through our lives. I've got many decades of leading worship in various churches and doing that at all different levels. And so basically used those initially in the area of worship music. And that kind of has led to these larger pictures in some of this. But probably the one little unique thing that I would, and you can just, again, if this is helpful or not, you can take it or whatever. But the deeper level of this with the courses I've been able to teach at the university level, we try to dig essentially what I've ended up calling them inklings and imagination, or the inklings and the inklings and imagination.
Okay.
Along those lines. And what we ended up trying to do, and this is why I think it's kind of cool to tie into your journey, your podcast here with Moments That Matter. Essentially, what I've tried to do with the teaching that I do to college students is to walk through the lives and writings of J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, primarily, not just kind of not just this biographical, historical stuff in kind of a vacuum, but I try to find moments that matter in their lives and then connect those moments with a significant writing or book that came out of that. Their collaborative creativity is something that I really try to dig into, because I love to see how they help sharpen one another and partnered on many of their creative journeys, even when they didn't always agree on how to get there. They still served as creative collaborators with one another.
So, David, you have also had the opportunity to teach semester or year-long courses on the Inklings at both the high school and collegiate levels, as well as give lectures on creativity at local churches and at regional, national, and international conferences. What is it that you discuss in your talks?
Yes, obviously we do talk about recovery, escape, and consolation on a grander and deeper scale, or even in very specific circumstances. Because of my career as a worship leader and worship pastor in churches, that is the side of ministry and initial context of a lot of these my opportunities to go and speak at churches or at conferences and stuff along those lines. And as that has grown, I've had a chance to see a little broader application of this. And one of the more interesting connections that came out of this, one of the more interesting opportunities that came out of my teaching on recovery, escape, and consolation is some of these courses I've been able to teach at the undergraduate college level here in the recent years. I basically call this course Imagination of the Inklings, and we essentially try to go through over a semester or a year-long basis and dig deeply into the lives of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien primarily, but not just kind of in the pure kind of dry biographical view, but in a way that almost it really, again, uniquely grateful for your podcast, the direction that you guys have called with Moments That Matter, and that's I didn't use those terms in the same way. But essentially, that's basically what I've been able to do, is come up with unique moments that mattered in Tolkien's life and in Lewis' life. And then we look at those moments in the context of what was going on in their friendship and their families, their careers, their professional careers, and all those different aspects. And then connect it to what creative work, usually for them, it was a book or something along those lines, that came out of that moment, that significant life moment, and then how they sometimes even collaborated on some of them, and all of the whole aspects of creativity. So we try to get into that whole creativity side of it. We try to do it in a way that lets them see the author's life as not just this collection of dates and facts, but really it's a journey, it's a narrative. And there were moments during that narrative when very significant things happened, and we try to tap into those and dig deeply into those moments and the books that came out of them.
I really love the difference that you draw between escaping versus escapism, because especially with the example that you gave, I think I've been guilty of the latter, maybe far more than the former. And I've seen in my own life, I don't know if maybe we as humans are just maybe bent toward escapism. I feel like maybe even now more than ever through escapism in social media or escapism in goodness, even gaming, like you were talking about. I have students who have talked about that. I've in my life before have fallen into escapism through these realms that I didn't find it as strengthening for me to jump back into the battle, but just as its own little place that I got lost in and maybe found my way back out of. But what are some practical ways that you instruct your students, or maybe the churches you get a chance to address, some practical ways that we can recover well or escape well or find consolation well?
Yeah, we can start with one of the ones you were just unpacking, I certainly can. I think we all have, if we're honest with ourselves, we tend to choose escapism pretty easily over genuine escape most days of the week, and this is one of the things we try to bring into it, is to talk about all the different ways that we can how can we differentiate between genuine escape and addicting escapism. And so one of the things we talk about is practical ways. It's not necessarily, for example, if we use that video game, the example of the video game illustration, the circumstance or cause of the escape or escapism didn't change. The video game in itself is not necessarily good or evil. It's something that we have. And we have many things like this in our culture. We can talk about sports or even things that something like wine or other things like that are in and of themselves not necessarily good or evil, but it's in how we use or abuse these things. And so when we talk about trying to be true escape, we have to ask the questions: does this thing does it tend to make me enslaved, or do I get numb to my reality and just become content to just sort of muddle through a miserable kind of existence? And you forget to even think about getting out of the cell. So anything that numbs me or paralyzes me or causes me something that I want again and again at the expense of our genuine hope, that's got to lead us down that negative path, if you will. So that's kind of one of the distinctions that we would try to do.
That's really good. Follow up. This may be just a personal question for the travels that you've done. You mentioned Cornwall a couple of times, and yes. My wife and I watched the series Poldark.
Yes. As have we. We love it.
So totally got sucked in. I don't know at this point if I could say it was escape or escapism. I'm not really sure, because I pictured myself in Cornwall for part of those episodes. Since you mentioned it several times, it just invokes those really epic sort of landscapes and that kind of thing. For the travels that you've taken, what did you find were your favorite locations that were tied to maybe Tolkien's sort of landscape inspiration?
Right. Yeah, that's a super fun question. I got to make sure I got to limit myself to a couple of these places, but Cornwall in general, just personally, I'll go ahead and confess, it is the place. I used to treat it more as an addiction. I would say go to Cornwall and I will be happy. I've started to realize that to have help and that's of course addiction. That's not healthy recovery or healthy escape. To have that in a healthier way, I've tried to view it as Cornwall is often where I can see heaven the clearest, the most clearly. And so it doesn't necessarily matter. Cornwall is not what's special. It's heaven breaking into that moment, in a moment of beauty or whatever that we see in the landscape that makes that, it's not necessarily that particular place that makes it significant. And of course, I had to confess to you I used to go read Lord of the Rings, thinking it would make me happy. And I've read it now over 60 times. And there's certainly, some would say that's probably an addiction to something along those lines. But I always have to keep telling myself I'm going to stop reading it when I don't get anything new or I don't have one of those recovery, escape, or consolation moments as I read it. But there was a season where I used to try to go to Middle Earth. I wanted to be Frodo, and I thought that was going to make me happy, and it didn't. Of course, those are all the things that we try to work through. But in terms of that one beautiful place in Cornwall, it would almost have to be that looking at if you think about looking at Cornwall on the map, it's the extreme bottom and most westerly place in England. It basically it is the end of the land. They even have a town there called Land's End. But you're essentially getting some of the more unique terrain in all of the United Kingdom, and even in Europe. There's some of the most beautiful spots there. We go to a village called Coverack, and it's in some ways kind of a typical, if you kind of picture the Cornish fishing village from Poldark and some of the other great series that are out there that have explored Cornwall quite well. It has that little. So there's a steep descent down to the bay. There's a gorgeous little harbor, natural harbor, and they've built a stone. We would call it a quay, but in England, it's a quay, and you got to pronounce it the right way. But you come down to the quay, and of course they have a pub. There's an inn, and there are these other shops and stuff like that. But the incredible landscape of the bay there and the mountains coming down to the sea, you basically have just some insane views of walking on these cliffs. In the spring, when we travel there, you walk along the footpath on these cliffs from the town to town, and you can see incredibly gorgeous flowers of different colors and crazy stuff that we don't have in America, and these beautiful plants that just cling to the cliffs. And you're walking through all this gorgeous vegetation while you look down at the sea. And the sea, this is not a calm Southern America sea where it's got nice wide sandy beaches. This is the typical Cornish sea, which is whipping at 30 or 40 miles an hour with 30 or 40 mile an hour winds. There's waves. It's very strong. It's breaking against rock. They don't usually have many sandy beaches at all in Cornwall. There are a couple, but most of the beaches are stones. And so you see these incredible scenes of the water just destroying the land, beating the land. And those images of the sea, this is one of this particular area. Tolkien hiked these cliffs as a young man on one of his vacations with his adopted, the family that took him in after his parents died, after his mother died, essentially. But Tolkien walked on these cliffs, and he started getting some of the first glimpses of his own mythology of the sea, and that creative connection, in addition to just the gorgeous beauty, stunning beauty of the landscape. That's one of the reasons I love going back to Cornwall. I never get tired of spending time there. But those cliffs in Cornwall that Tolkien walked are probably one of my favorite places on the trip, and certainly one of my favorite places in the world.
Incredible. And I don't know if this is an appropriate question for
Go for it.
what we're talking about, but you said such a beautiful phrase, that's where you see heaven the most on earth. Do you think that was true for Tolkien? Was that sort of part of his, just because of the events in his life and his ability to walk through there and visit there, was that part of his maybe perspective as well?
Yeah, I think we could make that case, and that might be being a little presumptuous, but he certainly saw hell on earth in World War One, and saw all of the dark side of human creativity, and even things that we can't even begin to comprehend today. And so for him to be able to hang on to some of those moments of beauty, the cliffs of Cornwall are one. He took a trip to the Alps as well when he was a young man in Switzerland. And we've had a chance to reenact that hike as well, going through several places in Switzerland, following in the paths of Tolkien. But strangely enough, even though those mountains are more majestic in a sense, I still come back to the beauty of Cornwall. There's something unique about Cornwall that has that kind of flavor to it that even the incredible mountains in the Alps can't compete with. But Tolkien did have several places, and we try to go to as many of them as we can, and let you can kind of explore for yourself whether or not you think that the connection is legit. But from his writings later on, he talks a ton about the sea. He talks, how he loves mountains and Middle Earth, and all of his mythology is built upon those two things: the seas and the mountains, and then the people that inhabit that world, the peoples that inhabited that world. He developed their history and their languages based on these places that he saw as a young man. And so we try to, again, get a little bit of a taste.
David, I also want to provide a kind of sequel to the podcast episodes we did on the book idea a few weeks ago. I said then that whereas we mostly interview authors after a work is published, we thought it might be fun to approach writing from the beginning and just see where it goes. So after I had the book idea, as I mentioned in the podcast, I started thinking about collaborators. And it was then that a doctoral student of mine just happened to mention your name and your Inklings Abroad group. So we met, and we're both enthusiastic about collaborating. Can you tell us what kind of draws you to that book project?
Yes, I am extremely excited to collaborate with you on this project for several reasons, and one of them right off the bat is kind of our shared connection to significant moments in people's creative lives that usually result in some kind of creative work, and both of us kind of having that as our passion for many years. That shared interest is one of the things that excited me as well. And as we started to talk together about some of this stuff, realized that I love to hear your kind of initial take on looking at these the two pairs of creative artists, Tolkien and Lewis, Lennon and McCartney. On just a surface level, it's also fascinating because as well as my love of the Inklings, I do teach pop music at Clemson University. So I work with the pop choral groups and have had a chance to do arrangements of Beatles songs we've sung. We just did one a couple of years ago there at one of our concerts. So I've loved the Beatles music and have looked at Lennon and McCartney's legacy from just a purely musical side of it and in my professional career. And so to be able to kind of look at them in the context of comparing them with Tolkien and Lewis and putting them kind of in the same, recreating one of those conversations where you have all four of them together maybe, or going on this journey together. But yeah, looking at them to all four just has a unique call to me. The other side of it as well, as you talked about, getting into the whole idea of the fact that because each one of these four men lost their mothers at a fairly young age, the whole idea of resiliency through suffering and trying to build that characteristic for us. This is one of the things that we try to talk about with our Inklings groups, whether we're abroad or just locally with our friends and neighbors. We want to really try to give people a place to build resiliency where they can come back into a safe space to be creative and really try to collaborate with others without the fear of being run over or rejected. And some of the stuff with the famous battles between C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien, and even between Lennon and McCartney, we certainly want to make sure that we try to avoid their errors, because they, at least for Tolkien and Lewis, I can just immediately realize that they almost damaged their friendship beyond repair at one point after they had been reconciled once after the death of Charles Williams. But when Joy Davidman came on the scene and Lewis and Joy got married, there was another kind of breaking of the fellowship, if you will, and they didn't recover from that until Tolkien realized, once Lewis was dead, he realized that he had been a fool and should not have been as harsh in his relationship and his treatment of Joy and Lewis. And so again, they had to realize those things the hard way. And so we want to come up with this whole idea of our gut motto is chasing creativity and community. And that's something that I've tried to kind of live by, and one of these things about building resiliency, having a deep relationship between the people who travel, between the people who gather in our weekly or monthly talks together. We basically try to have a place where we can be honest about trying to help each other get better, but we always do it with the eye on preserving the relationship first. And one of the reasons this is significant is as we seek to give them recovery, escape, and consolation as they pursue their vocations, whatever career they're in. We want them to be more creative. But in my research for my dissertation project, I realized I talked with dozens of worship leaders and artists and creative people in Christian churches, and almost I think I could pretty much say to a person, they all had some story of pain and brokenness from the church. Friendly fire, if you will, where creative people, artists, worship musicians had been wounded by comments, by a misunderstanding, by church leaders, by battles over this and that. And so as I've seen, we haven't always done that. We haven't always handled creative people well in the church. And I've been on both sides of that as a pastor and as a worship leader who was hurt and has been wounded many times in some of these situations. And so this is one of the things we wanted to kind of give, that kind of gives me personal fuel to try to help people and help churches kind of get a healthier way to process creativity, to process beauty, and to be able to use, they can start to see that when we do worship and music at church, it's still giving us recovery and escape and a consolation. It's not undermining what the mission of the church is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be kind of hand in hand with the mission of the church. And so I try to see all of those things come together. And so again, that's one of the reasons that I've been excited to try to partner with you and to see some of this whole idea of helping people and churches kind of build resiliency and start to have healthier conversations about creativity that don't end up breaking people or breaking their relationships beyond repair.
Yes, and I'm very grateful for your partnership. And it doesn't escape my notice that even as I'm talking about creative collaboratives, in the 20th century, that somehow we've created a creative collaborative in the 21st century. So there you go.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, David, for your time. And thank you, kind listener, for yours. We hope that you will join us again for the next episode of Moments That Matter.
Thanks for listening to Moments That Matter, a podcast that looks at the moments in our lives that come along from time to time that have consequences long after the moment, especially those moments that have to do with the choice of vocation. In his book, Let Your Life Speak, Listening for the Voice of Vocation, Parker Palmer speaks of a clearness committee in the Quaker tradition, wherein a group of older, wiser people ask questions of someone considering a life choice as a way of clarifying the next step. We may not meet with a committee about these big decisions, but we all have these critical junctures in our lives, which we can think of as clearness committee moments. We need to pay attention to these moments because they are profound and potentially life-altering. We'll relay stories from our lives and interview others about theirs, especially noting the clearness committee moments, those we choose to recognize and those that were sadly ignored, those decisions that were made with God in mind and those that were not. Our hope is that these podcasts will cause you to think of the same kind of moments in your life with new clarity.